An asteroid broke off the moon and now it's super close to Earth. Does it pose a danger to us? Kama'oalewa, also known as 2016 HO3, spins super quickly as it orbits near our planet. Let's call it HO3 for short. Astronomers found it on April 27, 2016. Compared to other asteroids, it's tiny. On Earth, though, it would be the size of a small building, or about half the size of the London Eye Ferris wheel. They discovered it in Hawaii, and its name roughly translates to a fragment of something that seems to wobble. After some study, they realized that this asteroid might be a chunk of the moon that got blasted into space. There's a part of the moon called Giordano Bruno crater, named after an Italian philosopher, that guy who had to pay quite the price for his ideas. If you look at it from space, Giordano Bruno stands out because it's surrounded by some rays of material. They're super huge, stretching over 93 miles and are still bright. This means that an enormous boom once happened there. There's an interesting story about this. In 1178, 5 monks were traveling in Canterbury, England. Suddenly, they saw something strange happening on the moon. They said it looked like the moon was splitting, with flames and sparks. Then there was a darkening that spread all across the lunar surface. In the 20th century, scientists found these records and thought that these monks saw the formation of the Giordano Bruno crater. But later it turned out that the crater is about 4 million years old. And thank the stars, because such a massive impact, if it really happened in the 12th century, would have gone crazy on our planet. It would have caused a huge meteor storm on Earth. In any case, our HO3 is most likely a piece of the moon that broke off during that impact 4 million years ago. Luckily, there's no need to panic about it. When astronomers spotted this sudden moon piece, they quickly tracked its orbit. Turns out, it won't collide with us anytime soon. It's going to be our quasi-satellite for at least 300 more years, meaning it'll follow a path around the Sun that keeps it close to Earth without colliding. Its orbit is wild, though. It seems to be constantly looping around our planet in some pretty unique loops, moving closer and going away, up and down. And then somewhere in the 24th century, it will go even more crazy, switching to a horseshoe orbit, slowly going away from us. Could HO3 collide with us someday? Maybe, but that would happen over millions of years, when it would leave its current orbit and collide with Earth, Venus, or even the Sun itself. Or maybe entirely ejected from the solar system. Even though it's one of the closest asteroids ever discovered, it's also one of the smallest and most stable ones. This discovery also opens up some exciting ideas about life in the universe. We see that rocks can travel between celestial bodies. There is a theory that life could have been spread all across the universe by traveling on these rocks like on some space Ubers, or at least the building blocks of life like carbon. Maybe life even hitchhiked to our planet on rocks from Mars. HO3 probably doesn't carry any life, but the fact that it can travel for millions of years carrying stuff on it and feeling fine supports this theory. Astronomers want to send something to investigate HO3. Back in 2017, a group of students gave an idea of using a spacecraft for it. The China National Space Administration wants to send a robotic probe to HO3 somewhere in 2025. The robot should fly there, collect samples, and bring them back to Earth for study. Unfortunately, you can't see this asteroid in the sky with the naked eye. Its size is about 130 to 330 feet in diameter, so it would be too tiny and dim to see without a super powerful telescope. But there is an asteroid that you'll be able to see, and it will be insane. In 2029, a large asteroid will pass so close to Earth that it will be visible to the naked eye. Make sure not to miss it, because this is a once-in-a-thousand-year event. The asteroid is known as 2004 MN4, or Apophis for short. It's much bigger than HO3, about 1,210 feet wide. This will be the closest asteroid passage ever. This one actually caused some panic back in December 2004, all because there was a 2.7% chance that it could hit Earth in 2029. People were horrified. Even the name, Apophis, is inspired by an evil serpent from ancient Egyptian mythology. a huge monster that fought Ra and always tried to swallow the sun and destroy the planet. Luckily, when scientists got more data, they realized that it would pass pretty close to us in 2029, and we'd be able to see it in the sky. But then, it will just fly away like a chill asteroid. There was another worry though. That during its close pass, Apophis might travel through something called a gravitational keyhole. Basically, that it could travel through a specific narrow region of space which would accidentally alter its orbit. And then it would make an epic comeback in 2036, like the planet from the movie Melancholia. However, after some calculations, scientists ruled out this possibility as well. Apophis will still come quite close to us in 2036, but it will be about as far away as Venus is when it overtakes Earth. And then, Apophis and Earth will just go their own separate ways. On average, an asteroid the size of Apophis is only expected to hit Earth once every 80,000 years. And if it did hit us, it would completely destroy a huge area, causing earthquakes and tsunamis all around the world. But it wouldn't cause an apocalypse or anything like that. You'd only be able to see Apophis from Europe, Africa, and Western Asia. So if you want to see it, you might need to travel. The asteroid will look like a fast-moving star in the night sky, shining bright enough to be seen without any special equipment. It would be easy to spot at night, though city lights might make it harder to see. Now, can you imagine that these are not the only guys hanging nearby? Both HO3 and Apophis are part of the so-called Apollo orbit asteroids. These are the asteroids with orbits going around Earth, an entire group of dangerous fellas. Since they cross Earth's orbit, they have the potential to come close to or even collide with our planet. The first asteroid of this group to be discovered was 1862 Apollo, named after the Greek deity of the sun. It was first discovered in 1932, and the group was named after it. This one was even bigger, almost a mile in size. In fact, it's so huge that it even has its own tiny moon. Apollo crosses orbits of not just Earth, but also Venus and Mars. Fun fact, even though it was the first one of its kind, telescopes accidentally lost it out of view for over 40 years. So scientists went, oh well, let's just keep the count of things we can see. When Apollo was rediscovered in 1973, it wasn't the first asteroid on the list and got a big number in its name. Apollo will fly near us during the next hundreds of years. In 2075, it will be somewhere around Venus, but it should fly by as well. In any case, there's no need to worry, because astronomers are keeping a close track on these guys. If we were in any immediate danger, we'd have known. In order for an asteroid to totally destroy life on our planet, it should be bigger than 6 miles in diameter, like the one that helped to wipe out the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. But these guys are so crazy rare, we'd probably live on other planets by the time they arrive on Earth. About 8 billion inhabitants of planet Earth found out the same terrible news in one day. Someone saw it on TV. Others heard it on the phone while scrolling through social media or listening to music. Some witnessed this news in a dream while sleeping. Someone's voice said it in all languages to ensure everyone understood it. I have good news and bad news for you. Let's start with the bad news. You're all characters in YouTube videos in which your planet gets into a situation where the moon breaks in half. For the audience, it will be a hypothetical story, but for you, these events will become a reality. The good news is that I was joking. There's no good news. But don't worry, the apocalypse won't start on your planet. Maybe just a little bit. Have a nice day. At first, the entire population panics. Then, a few days later, everyone calms down. Maybe it was a mass hallucination, and the moon will be all right. But at this moment, scientists have discovered the danger. A colossal meteorite is flying towards us from the distant depths of space. This meteorite is super fast and pretty flat, but has sharp edges. Fortunately, it will miss the Earth by a few thousand miles, but the moon won't be that lucky. The meteorite flies through our Earth's only natural satellite directly in the middle. So it passes through the moon, sweeps past our planet, and flies away into distant space. At this moment, all people can't take their eyes off the moon. The meteorite cuts it perfectly in half, gently, clearly, painlessly. So, what shall we do now? Will the Earth survive this? Our satellite breaks into two equal parts, but fortunately, they don't fly away from each other. The moon's great gravity attracts them back like a magnet. Scientists are sure that the parts will connect in a couple of billion years and the moon will become the same as it used to be. But the coolest thing is that people won't feel any changes. Everyone around the world will celebrate this good news. The voice was wrong. But then, another problem appears. A massive meteorite in the form of a shoe is flying from the deepest space to us. It enters our solar system and approaches the Earth at high speed. The space boot crashes into one half of the moon and then flies away. Now, the moon is definitely breaking into two parts. The first half remains in the same place. The second one is flying towards us. A small meteor shower begins on Earth because of the falling moon fragments, but it's not so bad. Most of these rocks are burning up in the atmosphere. But almost the entire split-off half is falling apart around the orbit of our planet. It forms a stone belt. Now the Earth is like Saturn. Rotating fragments destroy part of our artificial satellites. Communication and the internet work inconsistently. It takes people a couple of years to restore a stable connection. The International Space Station no longer exists. Luckily, all the astronauts managed to return to Earth before half the moon got to them. So, moon rocks are flying around the planet, and people see half the moon in the sky. Life doesn't change much for the first few days, but those who live on the coast of the seas and oceans notice the consequences. The moon used to influence the tides. It was flying around the Earth and made oceans take an oval shape. There were tides on the side where the moon was closer. There were ebbs on the opposite side. But now, this schedule is wrong. Half of the moon attracts less water. Yes, the moon lost half its weight and began approaching the Earth. But its gravitational force has become weaker. Seabirds, many species of fish, sea turtles, and other coastal animals may not survive these changes. Their natural instincts associated with the moon help them determine the time for getting food, breeding, and flying south. For example, tiny turtles expect a strong tide in the morning. They run to the water, but the water doesn't reach them. Turtles can't hide in the ocean in time and become dinner for seagulls. Crabs can't lay eggs because the tide has started earlier than usual. Wolves go mad in the woods. They howl loudly every night and can't stop. The whole natural world can't understand what's going on. The human body is also feeling some discomfort. Many people have low and high blood pressure, and some experience severe headaches. Half of the moon changes the entire ecosystem of the planet. Adapting to new conditions will take several tens, maybe hundreds of years. A couple of weeks pass, and people notice the days are now shorter. The moon always slowed the Earth's rotation and made one day last 24 hours. The Earth is spinning faster now. The night and the morning come earlier than everyone is used to. Earth rotation speed has increased and reduced the number of hours per day to 15. People suffer from insomnia or oversleeping. The body needs time to get used to it. Work schedules are changing all over the world. Previously, people came to the office at 9 and left at 6. Now, they arrive at 7 and leave at 2 p.m. Sleep time got shorter, and people are really sad because of this. Progress slows down because the short working time. The technologies of the future are now 20 to 30 years late. Hourly pay remains the same, so bosses now pay less for fewer working hours. The whole moon stabilized the weather and climate on the planet. Look at Mars. It has 2 small moons. They quickly spin around it and rock Mars around on its axis. As a result, strong winds, sandstorms, and thunderstorms often happen on the red planet. Now the half of the moon that approached us takes the Earth out of stable rotation. This changes the seasonal temperatures in the world. It even gets hotter in hot places. And snowstorms are raging in cold regions. There are short, massive downpours instead of sunny weather. A typical breeze can grow into a hurricane and small waves into a tsunami. The seasons are changing faster now. Winters are colder and summers are hotter. Changing the rotation of the planet affects the Earth's magnetic field. Since the compass and navigation systems are unstable now, we need to recalculate where the north and south are. Birds can't fly south to wait out the winter since they don't know what direction to fly. Their inner compass is broken. Several hundred years have passed. People are entirely accustomed to the new conditions on Earth. New species of animals and fish have appeared. Birds can navigate the sky by the moon again. The planet's economy has been restored. Hourly wages have become higher. People now get enough sleep from 5 to 6 hours a day and work for 4 to 5 hours. The reduction of day and night has also affected the entertainment industry. Movies now last 1 hour. One episode of some TV series lasts 30 minutes. Life goes faster. An average person now lives to be 96 years old. In fact, the passage of time hasn't changed at all. Its calculus did. Several thousand years have passed. People look different now. Now they have big eyes that absorb more light. Half of the moon doesn't shine as bright as the whole thing, so the nights have become darker. It took the human eye a couple of thousand years to develop the ability to see clearly in this new dark. Animals need to navigate better in these conditions, so their eyes have become larger and more sensitive. During all this time, people have cleared the orbit of moon rocks. Several space stations fly around our planet. And again, people hear this strange voice that once told them that they were all characters in one hypothetical YouTube video. This time, the voice says, "Your story ends because the video ends. I'm sorry. Good night."
It all started with a minor change on our planet. At first, people noticed the moon had become brighter and a little bigger. But nobody paid attention to this. The moon affected tides all over the world. The water flooded the beaches, but it wasn't a tragedy. A lot of fish came close to the shores. People found giant squid, anglerfish, and other creatures next to the coast, although they usually live in the dark depths. New, stranger things happen every day. Birds no longer fly to the south in winter. They gather in huge groups, flying around cities with no purpose. The moon used to help them navigate in nature, so they can't figure out which way to fly anymore. In the boundless waters of the world's oceans, ship captains notice that compasses are now unstable. The arrow is pointing in different directions since the Earth's magnetic poles have changed. People realize the moon has started to approach Earth for an unknown reason. The moon's gravity affects the gravity of our planet. This entails changes in the climate, the behavior of all living beings, and the magnetic field. Now, it rains in the driest places and gets hot in the coldest lands. It's knocking down ecosystems all over the planet. People living near forests hear wolves howling all the time. The moon drives these animals mad. The Earth's natural satellite is growing in size and lights up the night much brighter. Nothing critical has happened yet. People don't panic because they don't want to believe the end is coming. But then, one day, the moon reaches a critical point. You're walking down the street listening to music, and at that moment, someone pushes you. Okay, maybe that guy is late for work. You keep walking, and a girl coming by hits your shoulder. "I'm sorry," she says, and goes away. You've noticed the fear in her eyes. You look ahead and see people running towards you. You take off your headphones and hear screams and sirens. People leave their cars and run away. Hundreds of seagulls are flying in the sky. You hear a strange noise among all the sounds of chaos. It seems to be water. How is this possible? You're in the city center, a few miles from the shore. But there's no time to think. You notice a huge wave flooding the streets and heading straight to you. You run into a building and go up to the 10th floor. From here, you're watching the water filling the city. The strong stream blows all cars, one-story buildings, and trees off the road. You notice a shark and other fish in the water. People are hiding in houses and on the roofs. The whole city is quickly plunging into a catastrophe. The TV is working in the building where you're hiding. You learn that floods are occurring all over the world. Massive tsunamis cover coastal cities. In some places, waves reach the height of a 30-story building. Many towns have been washed off the face of the Earth. The moon is too close to Earth, and massive floods are just the beginning. The moon flies around Earth and helps to keep our home on its axis. The moon provides climate stability and helps living organisms develop. But now, this balance is broken. The moon is approaching and changing our planet's gravity. Earth can tilt slightly to the side and provoke massive floods around the world. Imagine that you're holding a round glass of water. Tilt it a little. See how the liquid moves from one side to another? The same thing is happening now with the oceans. But the moon is not just approaching us. It's flying around the planet and getting closer with each circle. It causes natural disasters in different locations on Earth all the time. Now the ocean floods one side, and a few hours later, another. So you see all the water going back from the streets to the shore. The oceans may return to the city again by the end of the day. Wait a minute. It seems the end of the day has already come. You notice that the sky has become dark. It's weird, because it's only 3 p.m. The moon changes Earth's rotation speed and makes the day go faster. The moon covers almost the entire sky and brightly illuminates our planet. You see huge lunar craters. It's so close that you can still see it even when the sun shines. In some places, the passing moon obscures the sun. The water is leaving the streets and everyone goes outside. At this moment, an earthquake begins. The road is cracking and the houses are collapsing. There are landslides on the street. Tectonic plates are shifting all over the planet. Imagine two magnetic balls that are approaching each other. So, one ball is the moon, and the second one is Earth's core. What do you think will happen to what's above the core? That's hundreds of thousands of miles of the Earth's crust. And now, it's all moving. Destructive cracks are emerging all over the world. The planet's highest mountains break down and turn into a pile of stones. The seabed cracks and releases magma from the underground depths. Volcanoes wake up and erupt magma. Clouds of volcanic ash cover the sky from the sun and the glowing moon. But the scariest thing is still ahead. A collision is inevitable. The moon flies around the planet like a ball in a round glass with a hole in the center. This force drives clouds all over the planet. Now there's a thunderstorm, but in 5 minutes, it will be snowing. Then the night comes, and it starts raining. Water droplets consist of mud and volcanic ash. It's difficult for people to breathe without gas masks. Atmospheric pressure is constantly changing. Some people experience severe migraines, and some have sore joints. But there's no time to think about your health. Humanity needs to figure out how to save itself from the collision. A new gravitational order will come when the moon crashes into Earth. Continents will change their shape. They will combine into one giant piece of land or split into 100 smaller ones. The energy of the collision can burn all the oxygen in the atmosphere and make the planet unsuitable for life. Hiding underground also makes no sense because of deep earthquakes. People decide to spend their last hours with loved ones and their families. The moon is getting closer. It's now at the same distance as the International Space Station. The moon covers the sky. Many cities are in the shadows because of the waves. Tsunamis, several miles in height, crash down on the ground. Millions of tons of magma collide with the ocean. Billions of gallons of water just evaporate. Moisture rises into the air, mixes with ash, and floods the land in the form of giant cumulus clouds. You've accepted the complete destruction of the planet, but something strange happens to the moon at this moment. You notice giant cracks appear on it. The moon slowly begins to divide into two parts. Both halves crumble into hundreds of large pieces. It's just falling apart. The Earth doesn't have a natural satellite anymore. It's just a pile of giant space rocks. But why is this happening? There's a space around our planet called the Roche limit. In this place, the gravity of Earth is stronger than that of the moon. This means that the forces holding the moon together are weaker than those that tear it apart. People are cheering. The Roche limit has saved the planet. The moon won't hit us. It breaks up into millions of fragments and forms a circle around our globe. Now, Earth looks like Saturn. A belt of moonstones surrounds us. Huge chunks destroy everything in their path, all the space debris. The satellites are no longer working. Humanity loses its means of communication and navigation. People will have to use paper maps again. The moon held our planet's orbit at a certain angle before these events. Now the axis is tilted differently. One hemisphere becomes closer to the sun, and the other plunges into shadow. The North Pole and the Arctic may turn into hot deserts, and the equator of the planet may be covered with ice. Winter and summer can last for years. The moon's remnants fly around Earth, but some of them fall on our planet. Lunar meteor showers destroy cities and create giant craters. All these events lead to the massive destruction of life on Earth. It will take hundreds of thousands of years to adapt to the new world. Okay, show of hands. Who still believes that the sun goes around the Earth? Nobody. Oh, but everybody used to. It sure looks like it does. The sun comes up in the east, the sun goes down in the west. The sun comes up in the east again, so the sun goes around the Earth. It seems intuitively irrefutable, and it is so. But it's not true. The sun doesn't go around the Earth. Everybody knows that, but only now. So why do people still believe the moon goes around the Earth? It's not true either. We have to go back over 500 years to begin to get an idea of how hard it is for science to change universally accepted facts. Nicholas Copernicus, around 1510, was the first to propose a heliocentric, sun-centered solar system, but he didn't do it publicly. Copernicus privately circulated letters to other astronomers explaining why the accepted fact of an Earth-centered solar system should be scrapped in favor of a more straightforward, more astronomically correct, sun-centered solar system. Copernicus's difficulty in promoting the sun-centered solar system depended on another bold conceptual innovation, that the Earth rotates. Copernicus's concept of a rotating Earth flew directly in the face of 5 literal statements in the Bible that the Earth was founded on a fixed foundation never to be moved. And the Catholic Church wasn't about to let that worldview be challenged or changed. Copernicus had too much to lose to go public with his revolutionary, pun intended, heliocentric theory as a churchman himself. 100 years later, Galileo Galilei wasn't so reticent. Galileo had observational proof to back him up because he had a telescope. In early 1610, Galileo first observed the moons of Jupiter and kept track of their orbits. Yes, the moons of Jupiter do orbit around Jupiter. They go round and round the giant planet in actual orbits, unlike, as we shall soon see, how our moon travels around the sun with the Earth. Galileo became famous, or infamous, as the case may be, because he discovered orbital motions that were not heliocentric, that did not fit the accepted worldview. It rattled civilization's Earth-centered cosmology. Galileo was indeed revolutionary. Later in 1610, Galileo observed through his telescope, which only had an aperture of 1.5 inches, the planet Venus going through phases, just like the moon goes through stages. Galileo wrote that Venus imitates the moon, in Latin, in his notebook. There could be no other explanation for these observations. Venus was orbiting the sun. People were afraid to look through Galileo's telescope when he set it up in the Great Square of Pisa. They were too scared to have their worldview revolutionized. Strange as it may seem, we are experiencing something similar to that now, concerning the moon orbiting the sun and acting like a double planet with Earth. People, scientists included, stubbornly persist in viewing the moon as its clever official International Astronomical Union name. It's a moon of the Earth, orbiting around the Earth, showing its different phases throughout the lunar month, or moonth, as moon fans sometimes like to call the 29.5-day cycle of lunar phases. Moon lovers' favorite day of the week, of course, is Moon Day. It comes right after Sunday. But back to the science. It's how our school books portray the phases of the moon. It's what people believe now. Notice how the Earth is the moon's center, and how it goes around the Earth in a circular path. This is the geocentric view of the moon. It's what we see from Earth. The moon comes up, the moon goes down. The moon comes up again. The moon goes around the Earth. But that's not what's happening in space. It's way past time we Copernicus-size the moon. We need to start seeing the moon from a heliocentric point of view, as we do for everything else in the solar system. First of all, the geocentric view of the moon's phases shows the Earth stationary, sitting in the center of the moon's path for a whole month. But the Earth is not stationary at all. We're zooming around the sun at a very high speed, anywhere between 66 and 68,000 miles an hour. Therefore, any picture of the moon going around a stationary Earth is profoundly misleading and really outright wrong. The heliocentric view of the Earth and moon moving together in space should look something like this. Notice that the moon is not going around the Earth. It's traveling along with the Earth, around the sun. The path of the moon around the sun is a sinusoidal path back and forth, across the ever-forward moving path of the Earth. Notice that the moon always goes forward too. It doesn't ever go backward to either the sun or the Earth. By always moving forward and sinusoidal, the path of the moon does not qualify as an orbit in the same sense that the other moons of the solar system orbit their planets in elliptical paths. Therefore, it is wrong to say the moon orbits the Earth. The moon orbits the sun along with the Earth, or the moon and the Earth both orbit the sun, are statements Copernicus and Galileo would approve of. But science today has difficulty accepting a heliocentric view of the moon. Maybe there would be too many books that need to be reprinted. Maybe too many astronomy professors would have to admit that they were wrong their whole careers. Accordingly, objections are put forward to block the revolutionary heliocentric view of the moon from being universally accepted. One such objection is that the moon never leaves the Earth's gravity well, and therefore should be rightly considered a moon of the Earth, an orbital, to use the astronomical term for satellite. Undoubtedly, the moon never leaves the Earth's gravity well, or else we would lose the moon. However, representations of this well-known definite fact always show the moon moving around the Earth inside the gravity well, and this is not true. The moon never goes back toward the Earth as it would need to if it were in an elliptical orbit. So the gravity well objection can be dismissed because the astronomers who propose as orbital evidence that the moon always stays within the Earth's gravity well fail or neglect to include the facts of the moon's continuously forward sinusoidal motion. Escape velocity for the moon to leave Earth's gravity well is reported to be about 2,684 miles per hour. Relative to the Earth, the moon presently moves about 2,238 miles per hour. What kind of impact would it take to accelerate the moon that extra 450 miles per hour needed to knock it out of Earth's gravity well? If anyone wants to compute that, you're most welcome to put your answer in the comments section. Maybe it could happen, and that would not be good. There's another objection to looking at the moon from a heliocentric point of view, and that involves the barycenter of the Earth-Moon system. The barycenter is the center of gravity between the Earth and the moon. Think of yourself on a seesaw in the park. The other end of the seesaw is a massive lineman from a professional football team. How far forward towards you would the lineman have to move so that you both are balanced evenly? He'd have to move towards you almost to the center of the seesaw. You are the moon and the lineman is the Earth, although Earth is a feminine name. The balance point of the Earth-Moon system, the barycenter, is over 1,000 miles inside the Earth. It is this balance point, astronomers dutifully point out, that is orbiting the Sun. It is a heliocentric point of view. Copernicus and Galileo would approve. However, these astronomers always seem to add the geocentric animation of the moon orbiting around the Earth, with the barycenter inside. In this way, they can keep the moon orbiting around the Earth. But it's somewhat dishonest to combine two different perspectives in one animation. You can't have your cake and eat it too. This leads us directly to the real sticking point that keeps us from believing that the moon is orbiting the sun, the double planet conundrum. The International Astronomy Union refuses to consider the moon and Earth a double planet. They refuse to do so almost exclusively because the very center of the Earth-Moon system is inside the Earth. It's tough to buck City Hall, as the saying goes. You'll recall that IAU, or UAI if you use the French designation, demoted Pluto to dwarf planet status, and they still haven't reversed that decision despite seemingly ample evidence that Pluto is the 9th planet. Perhaps we should reflect on what it means to be an Earthling. To be an Earthling implies that we know ourselves to be space-borne people orbiting a yellowish star near the outskirts of a spiral galaxy. We, meaning all the peoples of Earth, live in space and are absolute creatures from space. Above us is the Moon, Earth's companion. We're making a big mistake by referencing the Moon according to our geocentric parameters. Our conceptual expansion into space is inhibited by an incorrect, outdated, Earthbound view of the Moon. The universe doesn't revolve around us, and neither does the Moon.
Neil Armstrong had been getting ready for his mission on the Moon for over 3 years. To resist microgravity conditions, he had to learn how to walk sideways by being strapped and suspended at an angle in trying to walk along walls. His limits were tested through an intense diet and sleep regimen, since in space he would only have beef and vegetables, previously dehydrated and stuffed into a package. Back in the day, astronauts had to experience the desert, jungle, open sea, and Arctic survival training. These days it's a lot more structured. But back then, it was more of a let's drop this person in the middle of nowhere with no supplies and see if they make it. Before landing on the Moon, he had to gather and study rock samples in the Grand Canyon, explore ancient volcano formations in the Nevada National Security Site, and look into gas and lava vents, lava lakes, and pit craters in various locations in Hawaii. On July 20th, 1969, Armstrong was given a hearty breakfast before blastoff. Steak, eggs, toast, juice, and coffee. He received what doctors call a low-residue meal, which means he wouldn't have to go to the bathroom soon after. It took him 109 hours and 42 minutes to reach the surface of the Moon, in an area called the Sea of Tranquility. He had to travel 240,000 miles to get there. The crew could have gone for the Ocean of Storms or the Central Bay, but this place was chosen for landing because it had good visibility, was relatively smooth, and was easily reachable with as little propellant as possible. When he was at about 500 feet above the surface of the Moon, Armstrong had to maneuver the spacecraft manually to make sure they wouldn't land in a dangerous crater. He continued to hover for about a minute and a half, moving it sideways until he felt comfortable to land. As soon as his device landed safely, he immediately radioed to Mission Control, located in Houston, Texas. The now famous message,
"The Eagle has landed."
Steadily, he went down the Lunar's module's ladder, while a television camera was attached to the craft to record his progress. The camera also transmitted the signal back to Earth, where hundreds of millions of people were anxiously waiting. At precisely 10:56 p.m. EDT on the same day, Armstrong placed his feet onto the lunar soil, saying,
"It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind."
The schedule said that the astronaut needed to sleep before the first moonwalk, but he chose to go outside earlier than planned, since he obviously couldn't sleep. If Armstrong had walked on the Moon without special equipment to breathe, he would have smelled a weird odor, sort of musty and sulfuric. Still, he had the chance to smell it when he returned to the lunar module. The thing is, the dirt had clung to his feet, so the odor spread all over the cabin. He described it as wet fireplace ashes, or how the air smells after fireworks shows. Who would have thought you needed to pack a scented candle when going to the Moon? Apart from the people that have since made it to the Moon, no one ever got the chance to know precisely what the crew was smelling. Even during that first mission, when Moon soil and rock samples were transported to labs in airtight containers, once they were opened back on Earth, surprisingly, the smell was gone. He also felt the surface of the Moon to be fine and powdery, but said he had no difficulty in moving around. One other member of his crew joined him about 20 minutes later. The whole moonwalk took a little over 2 hours. During this time, Armstrong and his teammates set up various devices on the surface of our satellite. One was meant to precisely measure the exact distance from there to Earth, by timing how long it took for a laser beam to travel from Earth to the lunar surface and back. Another meant to measure moonquakes and potential meteor impacts, which leads us to the discovery that the moon was pretty alive after all. We know today that the largest moonquakes are much weaker than the largest earthquakes, though their movements can last for up to an hour, way longer than on Earth. They managed to gather somewhere around 50 pounds of rock and soil samples. They also snapped many photographs of the terrain, where they also planted a US flag. The astronaut even got the chance to catch up with President Richard Nixon, for less than a minute though. The final thing on the list for Armstrong was to go for a walk to what is now known as East Crater, 65 yards east of the lunar module. It was the greatest distance traveled from the spacecraft on that specific mission, approximately the length of half a football field. As soon as his tasks were done, Armstrong went back into the lunar module and safely closed the hatch to get some sleep. While preparing for liftoff, Armstrong and his crew discovered that, because of their chunky spacesuits, they managed to break the ignition switch for the ascent engine. No big deal, they thought. So they used a part of a pen to push in the circuit breaker to start the launch sequence. At 1:54 p.m., the famous Eagle began to ascend. Apart from the scientific equipment installed on the surface of the moon, a plaque was also left there. It read, "Here, men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon, July 1969 AD. We came in peace for all mankind." Years later, Armstrong said that NASA limited their time on the moon because they didn't know how the spacesuits would handle the moon's extreme temperatures, as high as 260 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, to as low as 280 degrees Fahrenheit below zero at night. Things got a bit more complicated when Armstrong landed back on Earth, since he had been exposed to unknown space particles. The result? He and his team had to be placed in planetary protection quarantine on their return, as soon as their space capsule safely splashed down in the Pacific Ocean on July 24th. That specific quarantine for the Apollo 11 astronauts is one of the reasons why we have microwaves in our kitchens today. When they first returned from the moon, they initially spent their first few days in a mobile quarantine facility, or MQF. Sure, the MQF featured comfortable chairs, bunks, a toilet, and showers, but it didn't leave a lot of space for fancy cooking. Since there was no room for a standard oven or grill, and to also reduce the potential fires that might have occurred, NASA had to get creative. That's how the original countertop microwave oven was developed, to easily help astronauts get their meals without the hustle of a fully equipped kitchen. These days you can see that first microwave in a museum in Oakland, California. After returning to Earth, Armstrong claimed he would never reach for the stars again. But he didn't stop exploring though. Back in 1985, he joined a professional team of other greatest explorers to the North Pole. He was joined by mountaineer Edmund Hillary, aviator Steve Fawcett, and photographer Patrick Morrow, reaching the pole on April 6, 1985. Armstrong claimed he wanted to see what the Earth's icy pole looked like from the ground, since he had only seen it from the surface of the moon. The Apollo 11 mission was nevertheless unforgettable for Armstrong since. In 2015, the Smithsonian Institution uncovered that he had kept hidden a cloth bag full of small parts from the lunar module. It included his waist tether, some utility lights, and their brackets, an emergency wrench, and the optical sight that was mounted above Armstrong's window of the space module. It also contained the data acquisition camera that recorded the iconic footage of Armstrong taking his small step on the moon. Armstrong kept it to himself for many years, until his widow, Carol, eventually found it. He even kept it a secret from his official biographer, who at many times asked if he had kept any memorabilia from his famous mission. He didn't sneak those objects back on Earth, though. He just mentioned it to be a bunch of trash he wanted to bring back.
Recently, Chinese scientists discovered something interesting on the moon, an unusual crystal. Moreover, they found out that this crystal contains an element that can literally replace nuclear fuel. Let's find out more. The composition of the moon has long remained a mystery to us. Half a century has already passed since the Apollo mission. Unfortunately, we haven't traveled to the moon much since then, so it's not surprising that it's not so easy for us to study it. But recently, we've made a breakthrough in this area. In December 2020, Chinese scientists sent the Chang'e 5 probe to the moon. The mission was named after the ancient Chinese deity of the moon, Chang'e. Quite poetic, isn't it? Anyway, after the probe went to the nearest side of the moon, it spent several days digging through the surface and rocks and then returned to Earth. In total, it collected about 4 pounds of various lunar rocks, like basalt, solidified lava, and so on. And yeah, maybe it doesn't sound too impressive, but it's actually a mini breakthrough. After all, we hadn't received any lunar samples since 1976. And these samples are very important for learning the history of our world. We've been struggling for many years to find out, for example, how the moon was born at all. Yes, there were a lot of theories, but we still couldn't find any proper evidence for any of them. But thanks to the latest missions and some computer simulations, scientists finally found out the truth. The moon was born when some random dwarf planet crashed into our Earth many millions of years ago. This dwarf planet was slightly smaller than Mars. The fragments of the Earth went into space, but some of them stayed in our orbit. Then they stuck together and formed the moon. It sounds horrifying, but in reality, the birth of the moon was the best thing to ever happen to our planet. If it weren't for this beautiful satellite, all our oceans would be small puddles. Life wouldn't have appeared on Earth at all. So this is already an amazing discovery, but that's still not all. Studying the collected rocks, scientists from the Beijing Research Institute discovered something unusual, a rare lunar crystal. Looks pretty boring, doesn't it? Just some tiny transparent monocrystal about the thickness of a human hair. We've already found such things on the moon before. These crystals were formed as a result of volcanic activity, just like some garnets on the Earth. And yep, the place where they discovered these crystals also suffered from volcanoes 1.2 billion years ago. That means that this tiny baby is over 1 billion years old. But that's not the most important thing. It's the fact that this crystal is made of a unique material, the one that we've never seen before. Researchers from the International Mineralogical Association have confirmed that such a composition can't be found anywhere on Earth. The crystal was named Chang'e, again after the same moon deity. And this is another achievement. This is the 6th previously unknown mineral that we've found on the moon and the first one found by China. Now, it has become the 3rd country in the world to make such a lunar discovery. However, this tiny crystal still wasn't the only remarkable thing they found. After studying this gem and about 140,000 other lunar particles, scientists have discovered something else. They found helium-3. Why is it so important? Because this is one of the elements that feed the sun and other stars in our universe. We tend to say stuff like, put out the sun is burning, and so on. And this is one of the reasons why many people actually think that the sun is a huge fireball. But it's not. Its burning is actually a completely different process, which is called nuclear fusion. The process itself is quite simple. During this reaction, hydrogen in the star turns into helium. But this simple process is actually one of the most violent and insane reactions in the universe. There's a real boiling broth of particles inside the sun. The hydrogen nuclei that jump and rush there are constantly repelling each other since all of them are positively charged. And so they could continue to boil and chill around without bothering anyone if it weren't for the stars. The stars turned out to be cheaters. They have such strong gravity that they basically grab billions of these little atoms and squeeze them together. Combining with each other, these atoms create new heavy elements, like the mentioned helium. And when this happens, they throw a lot of energy into space. And that's how the sun burns. At the same time, it spreads so much energy that we can't even imagine. Okay, so what is helium-3? Well, this is an element to which even the sun can say, "Whoa dude, you should calm down." The fusion of helium-3 atoms releases even more energy than in typical nuclear fusion. And most importantly, it doesn't pollute the atmosphere with harmful things like radiation. We have very, very little helium-3 on Earth. Its prevalence in our atmosphere is about 1 in a million. And besides, it's constantly trying to escape from us back into space. Probably feels some bad vibes from us. However, scientists have recently found out that there's a place that contains a lot of this element. Yep, you guessed it, it's the moon. We think that there's more helium-3 on the moon than on Earth because of the solar winds. The sun has been hammering on the moon with its helium-3 for billions of years, so now it's all over the place. It's still not too much if you compare it, for example, with Jupiter or Saturn. But don't forget how much energy it can release. For your information, with only 25 tons of helium-3, it's possible to provide America with energy for an entire year. Now, there are 35,000 tons of it here on Earth, and more than 1 million tons on the moon. Only these sources could feed the entire US for thousands of years. So basically, in the future, helium-3 may become a new source of fuel. And it's better than nuclear fuel in basically everything. Helium-3 won't leave any harmful waste and radiation. It's more powerful and not that dangerous. In other words, this environmentally friendly and efficient energy could be a revolution for our planet. Sounds cool, huh? So, what are we waiting for? Grab the shovels, you might say. But there's a little problem here. Unfortunately, we haven't yet come up with anything as wildly strong and hot as the stars. To use helium-3, we need crazy temperatures and pressure. We need a thermonuclear reactor, and we have no idea how to build it, yet. And even if we could heat it up to such temperatures and get the needed pressure, we still don't really know how to handle helium-3 correctly. Therefore, even if we have an infinite amount of helium-3, we still won't be able to use it. But still, there's a great power behind helium-3, so it's not surprising that different countries have already started a race for nuclear resources. Now that Chang'e 5 has discovered a new helium-3 deposit on the nearest side of the moon, this race can become downright global. For example, China already plans a new lunar mission in 2024, Chang'e 6. During this mission, they want to collect the first samples from the far side of the moon. As you can see, finding this lunar crystal was very important for us. These crystals can help us find new ways to create helium-3. And if we manage to do that, humankind will enter a new era. But to do this, we still have to solve a number of problems. How to deliver a bunch of these lunar crystals to Earth, how to make them produce energy, and so on. Let's hope that in the future these issues will be resolved and we'll find a way to produce clean, safe, unlimited energy.
Two pictures are rapidly changing in front of your eyes. Our huge planet and a black void. The picture of Earth is getting smaller by the second. You're flying away from the spaceship into an endless vacuum and don't know what to do next. The International Space Station flies 250 miles above Earth's surface. A spacewalk is routine for astronauts who work there. Astronauts have spent more than 11,000 hours in the black abyss to this day. Fortunately, during all this time, no one has ever flown away into outer space without coming back, as we've seen in the movies. But unfortunately, astronauts face other, no less terrible, dangers during spacewalks. One such accident happened in 1966. Eugene Cernan put on a jetpack and went into outer space to carry out some repair work. The jetpack, which helps an astronaut control flight in zero gravity, heated up a lot. Eugene put on special protective pants made of metal to protect himself from this heat. The pants protection didn't work when he went into outer space. Instead of directing the heat away from his body, the pants began to heat up. The suit was heavy and uncomfortable, like a knight's armor. It rubbed his skin and restricted movement. Working in zero gravity is physically very hard, but Eugene also had to deal with his whole suit heating up that day. Inside the spacesuit, he felt like he was in a hot bath. High temperatures and hard work caused overexertion, dehydration, and severe weight loss. His face was sweating, and drops of sweat blinded him. During this spacewalk, the astronaut lost about 13 pounds of weight. Other astronauts came to the rescue and took him back to his spacecraft. To reduce overheating, they sprayed him with cold water from a hose. In a sense, to go out into an infinitely huge open space, an astronaut must put on a suit resembling a body cage. Another dangerous incident happened in 1973. Two astronauts, Pete Conrad and Joe Kerwin, went into outer space to repair a solar wing on the Skylab space station. The wing didn't turn around, and the astronauts tried moving it manually. Using force, they turned the stuck wing, but it pushed them. The push was so strong that it threw both astronauts aside. They didn't have time to grab onto a nearby surface and began to fly away into outer space. Fortunately, they had safety cables that didn't let the astronauts go away for good. By grasping them, the astronauts returned to safety. In an ordinary modern spacesuit, there are more than 10 protective layers. Such a suit protects against extreme cold and hot temperatures. It's tear-resistant and doesn't leak moisture from the outside. This protection is necessary to prevent depressurization. If a small passage appears between your body and space, then all the oxygen will start coming out of the spacesuit. The more oxygen the suit loses, the more vacuum it gets. This leads to terrible consequences, such as suffocation and increased body volume. It looks as if you start to inflate from the inside. In 2007, Rick Mastracchio went into outer space to do some repair work. For some reason, there was a hole in his left glove next to his thumb. It was on the outer layer of the glove. But the worst thing was that the astronaut hadn't noticed it. He continued to work as if nothing had happened. But one damaged layer could destroy the second. The second one could tear the third one, and so on, until the vacuum reached the astronaut's skin. Rick was supposed to work 6 hours in outer space, but during the 4th hour, he noticed the damage in his spacesuit. The astronaut reported this to command and received an urgent order to return to the ship. He never found out how the hole had appeared. Inside the ISS, there are many chemicals necessary for working in space. For example, ammonia has the property of freezing almost any surface. This chemical frost is used to cool some components of the station during overheating. The leakage of this substance on the ISS is practically impossible. This is exactly what astronaut Robert Curbeam heard from experts during the training before his first flight to space. But this accident occurred to him on his first spacewalk in 2001. Robert was working outside the space station when an ammonia leak started. The liquid splattered all over his spacesuit. A thick layer of ice quickly covered the glass. Robert didn't see anything. He feared that he had broken something, but the accident was not his fault. The protective layers of the spacesuit didn't allow Robert to freeze, but the ammonia severely restricted his movements. The main problem was that he couldn't return to the ship. Ammonia could get into the station, and this could lead to an emergency. Robert had to stand in outer space for 1.5 hours and wait for the leak to end. After that, he successfully returned to the station. To realize how difficult work is in outer space, we need to understand what a spacesuit is. It weighs 280 pounds, which is as much as a scooter. You won't feel its weight in zero gravity, but it will still make you sweat. Astronaut Chris Hadfield had described it by saying that every movement inside your spacesuit meets resistance. The suit scratches your skin, squeezes your bones and joints, and forces you to spend twice as much energy on simple movements. In such conditions, you start sweating and your eyes get wet. This moisture flies inside the helmet and blinds you until it evaporates. But if there's too much moisture, it can threaten the life of an astronaut. Such a case happened in 2013 with astronaut Luca Parmitano. He went into space to measure something outside the station. At one point, he felt that the back of his head was wet. He informed the others about it and got an order to return to the station. When Luca was coming back, he had to turn upside down. As soon as he did this, water gushed into his helmet. It covered most of his face. Luca couldn't see or hear. He tried to report the trouble to base, but the water covered his mouth. Fortunately, his partners rescued him and helped him return to the station. When they opened the helmet, almost half a gallon of water poured out. Astronauts' cables are some of the most reliable defenses against floating away into space. But what if one broke from a strong push, or because the astronaut didn't fix it well? For additional protection, there's a backpack called SAFER, Simplified Aid for EVA Rescue. It's like a jetpack. It releases gas from small tubes and changes the direction of your flight. If you're spinning in space, SAFER stops and aligns your movements. You can take manual control and fly using a special joystick. SAFER was first used in 1994, but before engineers created it, there was the MMU, the Manned Maneuvering Unit. In 1984, astronaut Bruce McCandless used it for the first time. You may have seen this famous photo where he floats in outer space without a cable. The problem was that Bruce was the first tester of such a jetpack. He wasn't 100% sure if it would work. He went into outer space and unhooked the cable from himself. There was nothing else to keep him from flying into the infinite black abyss, and his team wouldn't be able to save him. Imagine how scary it must have been. Fortunately, the jetpack worked. However, after 3 missions, NASA decided to stop using the MMU as it was unsafe. After that, engineers invented SAFER. Jetpacks and cables are reliable safety systems, but the best protection for an astronaut in space is their skills. Each astronaut has 6 years of higher education and several more years of training. They spend many hours training in virtual reality with spacewalk simulations. They train their body, endurance, and mind, since the main thing in a dangerous situation in space is not to panic and stay calm.
These eerie objects are called quasars. They're some of the brightest and most powerful objects in the universe. They lurk in the depths of space, consuming entire galaxies with their insatiable hunger. But what are quasars? Where did they come from? And most importantly, are they dangerous to us? Picture a supermassive black hole, a cosmic monster so massive that it can swallow entire stars and bend the fabric of time. Usually, there's such a black hole in the center of every galaxy. That includes our own Milky Way galaxy. Ours is named Sagittarius A star. Sounds like the name of a hipster coffee shop, but in reality, it's a terrifying celestial body which is 4 million times heavier than our Sun. You can even see it online. For the first time, we took a photo of this black hole in May 2022. But don't worry. Even though it's supermassive, it's not going to swallow us up anytime soon. This black hole is relatively small and is too tiny to eat an entire galaxy. So it's more like a cosmic vacuum cleaner that sucks up stars or gas that gets too close. But there are black holes in the centers of galaxies that are way heavier and more dangerous than ours. They can weigh millions or even billions of times more than our own Sun. Now, imagine one of these monsters. Usually they're surrounded by a swirling, glowing disk of gas and dust, like water swirling down a drain. It's called an accretion disk, and it's where the magic of quasars happens. As material from the accretion disk falls toward the center, It heats up to millions of degrees, releasing vast amounts of energy in the form of radiation. And this radiation is what we observe as a quasar. So basically, the more material a black hole can consume from its surroundings, the brighter its quasar will be. This is what makes them so bright and powerful, shining like beacons in the night sky. And just imagine, some black holes can actually make entire galaxies their meal. Now, combine their ravenous appetite with some intense radiation, and you'll get a truly awe-inspiring display of cosmic power. No wonder we can see them, even though they're some of the most distant objects in the universe. Quasars were discovered in the late 1950s by accident. Astronomers were just chilling and looking at the sky when suddenly they stumbled upon something strange. Radio signals that had no visible source. By 1960, hundreds of these strange objects had been found. Astronomers named them quasars, short for quasi-stellar radio source. These objects were small and far away, but their energy output was immense and difficult to explain. Some thought that these were new types of stars. Others even proposed wild things, like quasars being made of antimatter or being the end of a wormhole. But all these theories were discarded. A scientist named Martin Schmidt was the first one to get to the truth. However, many astronomers didn't believe him. Schmidt had to do a lot of extra work and gather lots of evidence to prove his theory. And finally, he prevailed. And that's how we discovered quasars. Don't you love the scientific method? And since then, astronomers have been captivated by these objects. Why? Because they have some pretty eerie qualities. Hey, you could call them quasi-quasars. For example, they kind of defy the laws of physics. They emit jets of particles that travel at speeds close to the speed of light. These particles move so fast that they can even distort the very fabric of space and time. But sometimes, they also help us confirm the laws of physics. Now imagine driving a car. As you drive, objects in the rear window start to appear smaller and smaller until they disappear from view entirely. That's exactly what happens with quasars, except they're moving away from us at incredibly fast speeds, up to 90% the speed of light. Wonder why they're trying so hard to sprint away from us. But in any case, this helps us confirm that the universe does expand for real. Another eerie thing about quasars is that they're incredibly old. Some even date back to the time when galaxies were forming, or to the birth of our universe. Additionally, quasars are some of the most distant objects that we can observe in the universe. Some of them are located billions of light years away from us. This means that when we observe a quasar, we're actually seeing light that was emitted billions of years ago, when the Earth was much younger and different than it is today. And that's why they work like cosmic time capsules. Studying them gives us a glimpse into the distant past. You see, galaxies are like giant cities, with stars and planets serving as the inhabitants. But just like cities evolve over time, galaxies also undergo changes as they age. And that's where quasars come in. They're like the urban planners of the universe. They shape the galaxies through their powerful gravitational influence. By eating galaxies and releasing intense radiation, they can trigger star formation and shape the structure of the galaxy itself. It's like the cosmic equivalent of a master chef, or a leaf blower, you pick. For example, let's take galaxy mergers. Here are two massive entities coming together, swirling and spinning around each other. As they get closer and closer, their gravitational pull becomes stronger, and they start to merge into a new, bigger galaxy. It's a beautiful and dramatic process, one that can take millions of years to complete. But all this doesn't go without consequences. The gas and dust within the galaxies collide, creating massive shockwaves that trigger the birth of new stars and even supermassive black holes. And this is where the quasars come into play. Some quasars may be born during these galactic get-togethers, and thanks to this, they help us study the effects of this process and the evolution of galaxies over time. But it's not all serious science and no fun. For example, how about gravitational lensing? Now, that's something straight out of a sci-fi movie. It happens when the gravity of a massive object, like a quasar, bends the path of light from a more distant object, like a galaxy, behind it. It's like having a really big magnifying glass in space. When you combine a quasar with gravitational lensing, you get some seriously awesome cosmic eye candy. The result is kinda like a funhouse mirror, where objects appear warped and twisted in strange and mesmerizing ways. Gravitational lensing isn't just for show. It's also a powerful tool for astronomers to study the distribution of dark matter and the structure of the universe. And that's not all. Some scientists have proposed that quasars could help us build the map of the universe. They can work like giant neon road signs. Turn left at the quasar and you'll reach your destination. They're like lighthouses that help us navigate through space. By analyzing the light from different quasars, astronomers can determine the distances between them and create a 3D map of the universe. And the best part? Quasars are located throughout the entire universe. That's why this cosmic map can give us a comprehensive view of the universe on a scale that was previously unimaginable. Who knew that a giant galaxy eater could be so useful? There's still a lot we don't know about these mysterious objects. In 2007, a team of astronomers made an astonishing discovery: the first true binary quasar. Basically, this means two huge quasars spiraling around each other. What's more, they were hiding in plain sight. For years, scientists had known about this radio source, but had never realized that it actually comes from one lovely couple. The astronomers also estimated that this pair may have a mass of about 100 billion suns. They're super distant, though, at an astounding 12 billion light-years away from our blue planet. Overall, quasars are a fascinating and complex phenomenon that continues to baffle and intrigue scientists. They may be cosmic galaxy eaters, but they're also playing a critical role in the formation and evolution of the universe. And who knows? Maybe one day they'll become one of the keys to unlocking the mysteries of our universe. Oh, you quasars.
Astronomers have been asking one question for decades. Is space really as black as we think it is? Well, NASA's New Horizons space mission might have just given us the answer. After exploring Pluto, the spacecraft kept going and is now billions of miles away from Earth. This means it's far from all the light pollution we get from sources like the sun and dust particles around our planet. Scientists used the spacecraft's simple camera to take images of what looked like incredibly boring blank space, free of bright stars or anything else that could scatter light back into the camera. They then processed these images to remove all known sources of visible light. Once they'd removed the light from stars, plus scattered light from the Milky Way, they were left with light coming in from beyond our own galaxy. But here's the surprising part. They found that there was still plenty of unexplained light. In fact, it was about equal to all the light coming in from the known galaxies. That means there's just as much light outside of galaxies as inside them. So, where does all this light come from? Well, it could be coming from sources we haven't yet discovered, like small, faint dwarf galaxies or unknown phenomena out in the universe. Or it could be associated with dark matter, which is still a mystery to scientists. With this groundbreaking research, we can say that space isn't as dark as we know it. What if we take all the light from the stars and galaxies out there and throw in some gas and dust clouds? What color do we get? Beige. This leads us to another question. Do we still need the sun if our space is colorful? And the short answer is, yes, we do. The colors of space are a result of the interactions of light with different celestial objects, such as stars, galaxies, and gas clouds. While these colors are fascinating to observe, they do not provide the energy life on Earth needs to survive. There you go. Don't expect to see the color of the sky in space.
There are a lot of space objects all around the universe, from stars to planets to satellites, comets, and asteroids. But our closest celestial body is the Moon, which has been subject to much research, theories, and even myths. As our only natural and permanent satellite, the Moon is in the top 10 list of biggest satellites in our solar system. It's located in an outer spiral arm of the Milky Way galaxy. Other planets in our solar system, like Mars or Jupiter, have many other moons. Saturn is the planet that tops this list, with an astonishing 82 moons, of which 53 have names. Shall I go through that list of names? No? Okay, we'll move on. Our Moon, with its mean radius of 1,079 miles, isn't the biggest moon in the solar system, but is the largest compared to the size of the planet it orbits. The difference between a satellite, like the Moon, and a planet isn't their size, although that might be your first thought. The largest moons in our solar system are really huge. Some of them are even bigger than planets. Jupiter actually has a bunch of these types of satellites, like the icy Ganymede. It's the largest moon in our solar system, larger than Mercury and Pluto. It may even have an underground saltwater ocean that can surpass all the water on Earth's surface. Our moon's diameter is a bit larger than a quarter of that of the Earth. When it comes to mass, though, it's 80 times less than our Earth's. To paint you a better picture, if you think about our planet as being a big hollow balloon, you would need about 50 moons to fill it. But let's look at our moon's size from a bit of a different perspective. How does it compare to the United States? Well, the US measures 2,800 miles wide horizontally, which means the moon is smaller in diameter. It's difficult for us to see it any other way, but what if our satellite was twice as big? Well, first, we would see way more of those solar eclipses. In present conditions, they can happen 2 to 5 times a year, and 5 times is more of an exception. The last time there were 5 solar eclipses in a year was back in 1935. You'll have to wait until 2206 to see the next event like this. I might be around for that. If the sun and the moon look about the same size from down here on Earth, but I guess it won't be a surprise if I tell you the star we're orbiting around is enormous. So if the sun was hollow, how many moons do you think you'd need to fill it up? Wait, no need to Google. You would need 64.3 million Earth moons, or about 1.3 million Earths. Yep, it's that huge. And while we're on the subject of our sun, it has a diameter of 864,000 miles. Its mass? Well, it's no less than 330,000 times bigger than that of the Earth. What is a star, though? I'm not a scientist here, so I'll try to keep it simple. It's a ball of bright, flaming hot matter held together by gravity. The reason why they give off both heat and light is that, well, they are very hot. Experts call the smallest stars red dwarfs because of their size and color. They're also the most frequent types of stars in our galaxy, with some of them being so tiny and dim they are invisible to people on Earth. It's the case of our nearest neighbor star, Proxima Centauri. Our sun is considered a medium star since it has an average mass, brightness, and life expectancy. There are also giant stars out there. They are rarer but easier to see. That's why you can safely assume that roughly every star you see after the sun is set is much larger than the sun. But enough about it. Let's bring it back to the star of today's show, the Moon, our only natural satellite. But is it? That may or may not be the full truth, actually. Back in 1997, a group of scientists stumbled upon an asteroid about 3 miles wide, looking like it was caught in Earth's gravitational grip. It looked like a satellite of our planet. They called it Crunia. It takes this guy about 770 years to make a trip around the Earth. It also seems that it will remain in a suspended state around our planet for at least another 5,000 years. The Moon is also kind of steering away from us. With each year, it essentially holds up some of our planet's rotational energy and uses it to launch itself about 1.5 inches higher in its own orbit. If the data we have available today is correct, back when it was born, our Moon was about 14,000 miles away from us. The distance now is 239,000 miles on average. So, what will happen when it moves away completely? Well, no more songs like Moon River, Fly Me to the Moon, How High the Moon, that's for sure. Then there will simply be no tides in our planet's oceans, and our nights would become darker. The seasons would look a lot different, and so will the lengths of our days. Based on current calculations in the science world, this will take about 50 billion years or so. So there's no need to rush out stocking up on flashlights just yet, unless you just like to hoard stuff. There's also another catch here. Our sun gets about 10% brighter every billion years. I'll spare you the calculations, but to sum up, it's more likely that long before the Earth will be left without its moon, the sun will have already swallowed them both. Gee, I don't find that any more comforting. But hey, what makes a planet, well, a planet, and why isn't our moon considered one? I mean, it's bigger than some other objects in our solar system, which are technically planets. For starters, a planet is a celestial body that does 3 things. It orbits around a star, not something else. It is massive enough to become roundly shaped because of its own gravity. And lastly, it has the power to snatch up any dust or fragments in its orbit as it continues to move around the Sun. So, we've established that the Moon doesn't orbit the Sun, but it doesn't really orbit the Earth either. Both of them orbit a certain point stationed between them called the barycenter. It's about 1,000 miles below the surface of Earth, sure, but still some 3,000 miles from the center of our planet. Since this barycenter lies beneath the surface of Earth, we do not consider the Moon a planet. To be able to do so, the Moon would have to be either about a third larger or a third further away, so that the barycenter would be independent of Earth's surface. The Moon does have some other planet-like characteristics, though, which makes it very special in our solar system. Firstly, it has a crust, a mantle, and a core. It also has quite an active geology, with events like our own earthquakes. You guessed it right, they're called moonquakes up there. Hey, do they have moon pies up there too? Nah, come on. Let's continue our space exploration a bit more. Wait, what? You can't hear me? Of course you can't, because space is utterly silent. Since there's no atmosphere in space, sound has no medium or way to travel for you to hear it. You will want to steer clear of Venus if you do wish to continue your outer space travels. It's the hottest planet in our solar system. It has an average surface temperature of around 840 degrees Fahrenheit. Hot! You'd think that's because it's closest to the Sun, but it's not the case. You would also think that the closest planet, Mercury, would then be the hottest. Well, since this one has no atmosphere that would help regulate the temperature, it tends to have bigger fluctuations. Your calendar would also be very messed up on Venus, since one day on its surface is about as long as a year on Earth. That's because Venus is rotating slowly around its axis, taking 243 Earth days to complete its own day. If you were to pit stop on Mars, be on the lookout for those blue sunsets. According to NASA specialists, there is some fine dust that makes the blue near the Sun's part of the sky much more visible on Mars. Any diamond fans out there? Pack your bags, because there's a planet out there made of diamonds, and it's twice the size of Earth. They believe it's mostly covered in graphite and diamond. A spacesuit costs about $12 million, but a visit there would cover the expenses altogether, don't you think? And if you're not a fan of space explorations and prefer the comfort of our planet, here's some good news for you. We have more trees right here on Earth than there are stars in our galaxy, the Milky Way. We know there are about 3 trillion trees here on planet Earth and between 100 and 400 billion stars in our galaxy. Whoa, the light from outside your window just got brighter. It's 9:30 in the evening and you have a huge exam coming up tomorrow. You peek outside to see if your neighbors use their floodlights again, but they're outside looking up in the sky. You stick your head out and notice that the moon got a lot bigger, double in size. You run outside and ask people what's going on, but they don't have a clue either. You take a picture of it and post it on social media. You view your feed and see that everyone is talking about it. The dark sky is brighter because the moon has more real estate to reflect light from the sun, making the light more intense. You can feel a slight imbalance while walking. Every time you take a step, it feels like you're walking lighter than usual. Because the moon became so large, its gravitational pull became stronger, so gravity became weaker. Suddenly, you look below you and feel your socks are wet. You run and hop on the top of a car and see that there's water flooding your neighborhood. Everyone tries to find higher ground or run back to their houses. This isn't a fire hydrant that busted and is spewing out water. This is ocean water seeping in. You're confused and lose your balance. You slip and fall in the water as it rises. Some people are in their cars, but they can't drive anywhere because of the water. You live near the ocean, but there has never been a tsunami or any flood reports in your whole life. There are no reported earthquakes around the area, so something strange is happening. You run back to your house, trying to see if you can get out your old inflatable raft to help you with the flood. The only problem is that you need to inflate it but don't have your pump. You inflate it with your mouth at first, but it'll take forever to pump it up. You search around your house for an alternative and find your hairdryer. You plug it in and inflate the raft as much as you can until you use your mouth to do the rest. The water level rises by every second and has now entered your house. You pack up a bag with a good flashlight, some food, and thermal blankets. You go downstairs and see that the water is now at your knees. You keep walking until you reach the door. When you step outside, the water pushes you left and right since the waves are very harsh. Since gravity has changed, it's not easy to swim around. You get your raft ready and use it to float yourself down the current in your street. It doesn't help that the water is freezing, and you're in the middle of February. After a while, you reach the highway where water is coming directly from the beach. You manage to get on a high surface and take out your phone. You kept it in a protective compartment in your bag for safety. You only have 15% battery left, but you brought your power bank. You call your family to see what's going on, but they too have no idea. You venture into the forest and try to spot an old cabin you used to visit as a child to see if you left your old bicycle there. After a few minutes, you find it and bike across the mountain to escape the flood. You can't seem to balance yourself since the gravity is affecting you. Some scientists sit around with laptops and spreadsheets, attempting to understand what's happening. Everyone is shouting and throwing out random solutions, but nothing seems to make sense. After a while, the head of NASA decides to launch an unmanned rocket to the moon. The rocket is ready in a few hours, and everyone is awaiting orders. 3, 2, 1, blast off. The rocket soars in the air and approaches the moon. It exits the Earth's atmosphere and travels at full speed in that direction. After a day or two, everyone gets live footage of the giant moon. According to the studies, the rocket can't be too close to the moon since it may have a stronger gravitational pull. However, the footage shows that tiny particles are floating around it, similar to Saturn's rings. These rings look like a giant disk surrounding the large planet, but up close, they're just particles that are the size of rice grains to the extent of a large bus. They're orbiting Saturn because of the gravitational pull. The images show that these particles are big and small, which doesn't make it safe for the rocket to get any closer. So it suspends itself nearby to orbit the moon and unleashes a mini rocket that looks like a drone to get closer. The particles are many miles thick, making it difficult for the mini rocket to maneuver. It flies closer and the particles start crashing on it. It's a good thing that the mini rocket is durable for this. The rocket finally gets past the particles and lands on the moon. Gravity has gotten stronger since it inflated in size, which almost broke the rocket. As soon as it lands, another robot pulls out and starts driving around the surface, trying to get some clues. As of now, nothing is happening. But they're noticing some quivers coming from deep inside the moon. The moon's core is reacting abnormally. It looks like it's getting bigger and bigger. Scientists don't know if it will stop growing at a certain point, so the only way to find out is to drill a hole deep inside to uncover the reason. You're pedaling away and reach the other side of the mountain. The ground is shaking, and your balance is getting worse. You look across the mountain and see that the whole other side of town is flooded. You get your raft and supplies and make it there. You find a rowboat and paddle as fast as you can until you reach the lighthouse. From there, you can try to find the NASA station. Suddenly, you see a large rocket erupt from the ground and into the sky. You know for a fact that your brother is there working, but cellular networks are down. You paddle your way there for safety. The little rocket that landed unleashes a small drill strong enough to go miles to the center. It'll take days for it to reach down. So NASA is already launching another rocket to fly off and bring a bigger drill. The only problem is that the moon is getting bigger, so the particles around the moon also gather a lot more. The moon is reaching the Earth's size, getting bigger by the minute. The flood could reach several coastal states, and many micro-islands could be submerged, so it needs to be prevented. Gravity could affect the structure of most of the buildings, causing them to collapse one by one. But the little robot will not let that happen, so he's drilling to figure out what's going on with the moon. Some of the rocks appear to be getting hotter as it digs. This could be a sign of the moon expanding, which might ultimately explode. The scientists in the room are baffled and don't know what to do. The lead scientist, who is your brother, calls you, but he can't reach you. Meanwhile, you're still paddling around trying to get to NASA. On your way, you head back to the mountains to stay on dry land. When you arrive back at the old cabin, you see some strange men wearing trench coats looking for you. There's a stare-off until they chase you. They seem odd, like they're not from Earth. The drill has reached its maximum depth and can't go down any longer. Also, the control transmission is getting weaker. Suddenly, a figure pops out of nowhere and flashes its lights on the robot. The transmission chops and only show little snippets of the giant figure eyeing the robot. A little creature descends from the figure and walks toward the robot. Everyone at NASA is freaking out and recording every single frame. No one can believe what's going on. After a while, the creature transmits a signal that NASA can't decipher. But the creature seems friendly. The creature gets back into its ship and in an instant disappears into thin air as it teleports away. The moon starts shrinking. It's getting back to its normal size. Everyone celebrates in NASA and around the world. The currents become calmer and retreat to the coast. It's a good thing everyone reached the higher hills before. In the near future, people have made the greatest space discovery in history. The entire population of Earth looks up to the sky to see the greatest astronomical show ever. Is this real? What does it mean? Scientists have been studying galaxies, planets, and black holes millions of light years away. But all this time, something fantastic has been hiding in plain sight right above our eyes, on the moon. Starting a few years ago, humans began going to the moon again and finally set up a permanent base there. While excavating the lunar landscape, one lucky drill smashed into something like a metal plate. It turns out that metal contains polycarbonate, aluminum, gold, and silver. That's very similar to something humans already have on Earth. It's basically what CDs are made out of. People start going excavation crazy. Who knows what else is down there? The moon turns out to be our greatest resource. After a few months, lunar construction equipment has excavated several hundred feet of the shiny surface. At first, it was kept quiet, but a year later, that becomes impossible. Excavation crews dig out a huge rectangular shiny piece, the size of 10 football fields. And that plate is not alone. There are literally millions of them. After a little more research, scientists discover that the entire surface is covered with this strange material. People gaze up every night at the unusual moon in the starry sky. It glows a little brighter than before. You only need the most ordinary telescope to see that things are about to get weird. The excavation work isn't complete, but scientists have concluded that the moon is a huge disco ball. Who created it? For what? And what does this mean for us humans? No one has any answers. Soon, humans managed to dig up more than half of the moon. In some places, the plates are too deep to get to. They're stuck under mountains. In other places, the plates of the disco ball lie directly under the surface. Somehow, even with this crazy discovery, the properties of the moon haven't changed in any way, except that it's become brighter. Attempts to dig deeper, to pierce through the plates, are hopeless. The layer of polycarbonate and metal alloys is too thick and seems to go deep into the core of the moon. Some scientists suggest that if the moon's surface resembles a CD, it might just mean that there's some information recorded on it. That would change the course of history. They decide to build a laser reader to see if the moon really is a whopping big CD. Meanwhile, the drilling continues. On the dark side of the moon, which isn't always dark by the way, people find a small crater. Surprisingly, there's no shiny material inside. This perfectly round hole looks like a dried-up lake. At first, everyone assumes that there was a plate there. It just must have flown off somehow. But then, why was that crater so perfectly round? After a little more investigation, diggers find something that looks like plastic. What's that all about? Then, unexpectedly, the digging stops. The huge rig smashes against a thick alloy of unique durable plastic. There's a perfectly round plastic disc hiding inside the crater, the only one on the entire moon. It becomes clear that this huge disco ball was created by something billions of years ago. It's been covered with cosmic dust ever since. IT specialists scan the entire lunar surface with the help of satellites. They find something. It looks like there's a complex electronic system hidden under the disk. If you look at the moon as a whole, the crater starts to look an awful lot like, well, a button. Time to press play on the moon. To understand what's going on there, scientists try to get through the plastic layer. While they're doing that, there's an accident. An automatic drill explodes under insane pressure. The blast is so strong that it activates the button. All of humanity freezes in fear. There's silence, real silence. Then, it happens. The moon starts to rotate ever so slowly on its axis. Then, hour after hour, it rotates faster and faster. There's a mad rush to get everyone off the moon. Soon, it'll be spinning too fast to take off from safely. A lot of people fly halfway across the planet, where it's night, to see what's up with the moon. Every TV channel, website, blog, vlog, live stream, everyone's broadcasting the same images, those of the great disco ball in the sky. The moon begins to spin so fast that all the loose rock and sand on its surface gets scattered in different directions. Some lunar fragments fall on Earth and create an incredible meteor shower. The moon is spinning faster and faster. Now it looks like a real disco ball. The night sky is lit up with bright rays of white. It's incredible. People are ecstatic, amazed, delighted. But a moment later, all of humanity descends into a deep state of fear. Astronomers report that the moon is approaching Earth. When it gets too close, Earth's gravity will destroy it, and the giant crushed-up disco ball will smash into our planet. Every hour, the moon gets bigger in the night sky. Floods are starting to break out all over the world. People dust off their underground bunkers and get inside. There's no time to blast the moon with a rocket or anything like that. This could be it. The moon creeps closer and closer to the Earth's atmosphere. Then it stops, and nothing happens. Incredible! The disco ball isn't affected by our planet's gravity. Some sort of ancient technology inside the moon just saved us from disaster. Then, a deafening sound booms out from the night sky. It's coming from the disco ball. The sound wave obliterates all the clouds in the sky. It sounds like a roar, a deafening bass that makes the ground shake. It's intimidating, scary, but then a rhythm starts to come out from the wall of sound. Impossible! There's music coming right out of the moon. Then some plates start to change color. They turn purple, pink, blue, green. It looks wild. The different color rays dance around on the Earth's surface. It gives everyone an insane energy boost. Everyone wants to be outside, with friends, neighbors, anyone. One moment, you're standing under a green glow, and a second later, everything around you gets lit up in pink. The incredible light show creates an unbelievable desire to dance. DJs around the world team up to record a whole new sound that mixes with the moon's music. They call it MLB, the Moon Light Beat. People all over the world go out into the streets and kick off the biggest party ever. Scientists now think that billions of years ago, our planet was inhabited by huge intelligent beings the size of Mount Everest. They wanted to party and set about creating a huge disco ball. Then these creatures moved on to another planet. Earth was getting kind of cramped, and the disco ball was simply forgotten. Over millions of years, dust and rock obscured it from view. For several months, the moon continues to spin, and DJs keep pumping out music. People start to get a bit tired of the whole thing. They want a bit of silence and a calm, starry sky, not a glittering moon disco ball. Humanity starts experiencing mass insomnia and dizziness. All flights are grounded because the bright colored flashes make it impossible for pilots to see properly. Unfortunately, no one knows how to turn this thing off, and it's impossible to study because the moon's moving around too fast. The problem is solved by itself. The ball stops and returns to its orbit. It's possible that it just ran out of battery. People aren't exactly in a rush to reactivate it, but they leave detailed instructions for their descendants in case they want to throw a global party. There's something happening inside the moon, something that nobody expected. Not a dramatic shift you'd see on the outside, but deep down, where things seem frozen in time, scientists have uncovered a hidden layer of what you could only call moon goo. Remember those school lessons about the crust, mantle, and core? Much like the Earth, the moon is made up of layers, a crust, mantle, and core. However, the moon's core is much smaller compared to ours. Earth's core is huge. It makes up about a third of our entire planet's mass. The Moon's core makes up only about 1 to 2% of its mass, and its diameter is about 1/5 the diameter of the Moon itself. It's surrounded by a hard, rocky mantle, but it turns out that between these two layars, that mysterious goo layer, and it's way more important than you might think. The layer is soft and partially molten, ebbing and flowing like the tides in our oceans. It rises and falls, stretching and shifting as if it were alive. Its movement isn't chaotic, but subtle and regular. We always knew that the Moon influences our seas and oceans, causing tides with its gravity. But it turns out that we influence it back. The goo ocean reacts to the gravitational dance between Earth and the Sun. Also, the molten layer could be made of ilmenite, a very intriguing material. Ilmenite is rich in titanium, a strong and lightweight metal that we really love over here on Earth. Titanium is used in everything from airplane parts and spacecraft to medical devices, even in everyday items like bikes and laptops, all because it's incredibly strong and very resistant to corrosion and heat. So, if the Moon might have a molten layer rich in ilmenite, that would be awesome. Astronomers are already planning for lunar bases, and if we had a material to build structures, spacecraft, or even tools for astronauts right there, that would be a game changer. Otherwise, we'd need to transport materials from Earth, which is extremely costly. This is our first tangible sign that the Moon is not just a cold, boring rock. Instead, it's dynamic, living, and breathing, with moving forces beneath the surface. NASA used new special tools to discover this: the Gravity Recovery and Interior Laboratory and the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. These are both space missions designed to study the Moon, but they don't just look at the surface like a telescope. Instead, they help measure things we can't see with our eyes, like the Moon's gravity and how it changes over time. Grail sent 2 small spacecraft around the Moon named Ebb and Flow. Clever. The idea was for these spacecraft to fly close to each other and measure tiny differences in the Moon's gravity as they go. It's like they were feeling the Moon's invisible pull in different places. If the Moon's gravity was stronger in one spot, the spacecraft moved closer together, and if it was weaker, they moved farther apart. This helps scientists understand what's going on inside the Moon, even if they can't actually go there. And the spacecraft intentionally crashed into the Moon in December 2012 to end the mission. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter is a bit different. It takes super detailed pictures of the Moon and collects other important information about its surface. By combining the information from both Grail and LRO, we were able to find this goo layer. But this discovery actually challenges everything we thought we knew about lunar geology. How did this molten layer get there? How long has it existed? And perhaps more fascinating, how it stayed warm for millions of years? That's some million-dollar questions. The Moon's core generates heat just like ours, but it's not as easy as saying, oh, the core's heat probably keeps it warm and molten. Well, first, the Moon's core is much smaller and less active than Earth's, meaning it produces significantly less heat. Plus, the Moon is much cooler than Earth in general. With temperature dropping to minus 200 degrees Fahrenheit on the surface, how could this inner layer still stay in this flowing state? That's still a mystery. In any case, this goo could actually explain a lot of stuff about the Moon. For example, astronomers were exploring moonquakes and how they happen. Now they think that it might be this semi-molten layer shifting and moving beneath the surface. Now, beyond the Moon itself, it also tells us more about other celestial bodies. If the Moon, something we considered basically a huge static rock, has such a dramatic life, what about other planets, moons, or asteroids? Could they also hide similar hidden movements beneath their surfaces? We can even understand our own planet better, learn more about how tides and similar stuff works. There are so many great discoveries we've been making on the Moon. Recently, we found some awesome stuff beneath the surface, massive caves hidden for millions of years. For over 50 years, scientists have suspected that the Moon's surface is full of underground tunnels and caves. These are known as lava tubes because they were formed by lava. Duh! Millions of years ago, the Moon was pretty unstable. It underwent some volcanic activity, causing eruptions. When a volcano erupts, lava can flow across the surface. As the outer layer of the lava cools and hardens, it forms a solid roof of dark material. It's actually what these famous dark spots on the Moon are. These are dark, hardened remains of ancient lava. But the hot, molten lava continues to flow through the center. Once the eruption ends and the lava drains away, what's left behind is an empty hollow tunnel, hence a lava tube. On Earth, we have lava tubes in places like Hawaii or Iceland, where volcanic activity has created similar underground tunnels. The same thing happened on the Moon billions of years ago, although they're much crazier compared to ours. In fact, lunar lava tubes are now thought to be some of the largest and longest in the entire solar system. One such cave was discovered beneath the famous Mare Tranquillitatis, the place where Apollo 11 first landed, and it's at least 340 feet deep. Now, all these lava systems have remained hidden just beneath the surface, untouched for millions of years. Only now, they finally managed to prove their existence. Scientists from the University of Trento in Italy found them using special radar technology and advanced computer methods. These techniques let you see underground by sending radar waves. The waves bounce back and give clues about what's hidden underneath. By analyzing the way these waves reflected back, the researchers could detect the shape and size of the hidden caves. Now, the best thing about this discovery is that we could build all our bases there. These caves protect from radiation, harsh winds, and meteoroids. NASA even found evidence that some of these caves stay at a steady 63 degrees Fahrenheit. That's some crazy coziness for the Moon. And on top of that, there could even be some water there. So humans could take shelter inside these natural tunnels and build entire colonies on the Moon. And I know what you're thinking. Could unexpected lunar monsters hide deep in those caves? Well, sure. There's a huge potential for exploring these caves and finding some awesome stuff. But even if we manage to find a miracle, like small life or microbial organisms, there's a 99% chance that there won't be actual animals or monsters. It would just be impossible for them to develop in such conditions. But it would make a great horror movie. Researchers want to send robots or drones to explore the tunnels first, and then see if they're safe enough for humans. And it's not just the US getting in on the action. China is also investigating the possibility of using these moon caves as a future base, showing that the race to explore and settle the moon is heating up.
China's Yutu-2 is a robotic mission to the dark side of the Moon, launched on December 7, 2018. On January 3, 2019, it completes the first ever soft landing on the lunar far side. It lands in the von Karman crater, not far from the Moon's south pole. Scientists are interested in this area. Cold, permanently shadowed craters at the poles contain water ice. These ice patches are uneven and are likely to be ancient. In the south, most of the water ice is concentrated in craters, and at the North Pole, it's spread more sparsely. In any case, this ice can be used once a long-term manned mission lands on the Moon. Anyway, several days after Yutu-2 lands, it closes down its operating systems and hibernates through its first lunar night. It wakes up on January 29, 2019. All its tools operate normally. The rover travels 390 feet during its first full lunar day. One lunar day lasts for about 14 days, and a lunar night has the same duration. Moving and exploring during the day and switching off during the night becomes the rover's routine. It's the 8th lunar day when Yutu-2 stumbles across something incredible. This discovery makes the scientists put off all other plans for the mission. They focus on figuring out what the strange material found by the rover is. In the beginning, this lunar day is no different from any other. It begins on July 25th, when the rover starts making its way through an area pockmarked with tiny impact craters. Yutu-2 is helped and monitored by the driver team from the Beijing Aerospace Control Center. On July 28th, the team is preparing to shut the rover down for a midday nap. The sun is high in the sky. It means there are high levels of radiation and scorching temperatures that can damage the machine. Before powering Yutu-2 down, the scientists are looking through the pictures taken by the rover's main camera. That's when they spotted a small crater filled with something that looks shockingly different from the surrounding landscape. Unable to identify the gel-like substance, the team orders the rover to check this bizarre finding. U-22 cautiously nears the crater to examine the weirdly colored stuff. The machine uses special equipment that detects the light reflected off the substance. It's supposed to help the researchers to understand the structure of the material. Unfortunately, the nature of the unusually colored finding has remained a mystery for over a year. No wonder that both the finding and the fact that initially there were no images of the enigmatic stuff sparked curiosity all over the world. The only available description of the substance was that it looked like a randomly colored, shiny gel, something that's rather odd for the dusty, arid surface of the moon. But finally, the mystery seems to have been solved. The researchers have analyzed the information received from the rover's equipment. As expected, the substance turned out to be made up of rock, greenish and glistening breccia, in a sample no larger than 20 by 6 inches. It's kinda like a geologic version of Jell-O salad with fruit inside. If you melt it down, it'll look glassy. Breccia consists of sharp stones joined together by a chalky substance. The sample found on the far side of the moon is made up of a mix of different minerals. The main is a type of silicate that's one of the most common components in both the moon and Earth's crust. The piece also contains some glass, which means it could have formed during a volcanic eruption. But volcanic activity on the moon stopped more than 3 billion years ago. That's why the researchers are almost sure it's unlikely to be the source of the unusual finding. The material could have been created by a massive asteroid, comet, or meteorite that once hit the moon. During the collision, the pressure and temperature were so high that huge amounts of rock instantly melted. Some pieces cooled down rapidly enough to form glass. The rest gathered at the center of the impact crater and grew colder more slowly, forming a new rock. The substance was likely not formed in the Von Karman crater, but in the nearby Finsen and Alder craters. The hollow where the rover made its finding was just 7 feet across. Whatever left it had to be no wider than an inch. But then, it would be too small to create such a large piece of breccia. It's interesting that the material is similar to the samples collected by the astronauts from NASA's Apollo missions. One of those samples was made of dark, broken shards of minerals glued together. It also contains some black, shiny glass. It's not clear, though, whether it's the same as the stuff discovered by U-22. When the rover took photos and made its measurements, it was rather dark in the area. The quality of the images isn't that great. The experts also explained that the mission is examining a previously unexplored area of the moon. That's why they don't have any samples from that region to compare them with the greenish, shiny substance U-22 found. But if their guesses turn out to be true, then the far side of the moon might have more in common with the Earth-facing one than we used to think. But what's so special about this dark side of Earth's natural satellite, and why can't we see it? It's all because of the phenomenon known as tidal locking. Earth's only natural satellite rotates around its axis once in 27 days. It's the same amount of time it needs to go round our planet. That's why you always see the same face. To be precise, 59% of the moon's surface is visible to people. It means that you can catch glimpses of the satellite's far side at some times of the year. The moon's side we can't see is quite different from the one facing Earth. It doesn't have dark spots that are visible at night. Those are lunar basaltic plains called lunar maria. They were created by ancient volcanic eruptions. Those happened about 3 to 4 billion years ago. Instead of plains, the far surface of the moon has countless craters and tall mountains. One of the ideas about such a striking difference between the two sides is based on the collision theory. It claims that billions of years ago, Earth collided with another planet or some other massive space body. After that, the debris from this collision crashed with something that would later form our moon. That's why the satellite's landscapes differ so greatly. A more recent theory suggests that the Earth-facing part of the moon is warmer because of the heat radiated by our planet. During the period of volcanic eruptions, it was cooler on the farther side. That's why the minerals there became solid faster. They formed a protective layer shielding the moon's insides against the meteorites. But each impact left an impressive crater. At the same time, a much softer crust on the front-facing side of the moon spewed lava every time a meteorite hit it. After this lava cooled down, it covered the impact craters. Even though the far side is often called dark, both sides get almost the same amount of sunlight. The side we see looks a bit brighter because of the glow coming from Earth. There are two reasons why people are interested in exploring the far side of the moon. After leaving our planet, many radio waves get blocked by Earth's natural satellite. If astronomers could build their radio and optical telescopes on the dark side, they would get much more data. There would be no problems with any kind of interference. The telescopes would also be shielded from the glare of daylight coming from our planet. If telescopes were set up inside craters, they would also be protected from solar radiation. Astronomers would be able to get an incredibly clear view of the far regions of the universe. Plus, scientists believe there are great amounts of helium-3 on the opposite side of the moon. Earth is protected from solar winds that carry this gas by its magnetic field. But our natural satellite doesn't have such a shield. That's why experts believe the moon can be a perfect place for helium-3 mining. This rare element can be later used as the fuel for fusion reactors.
August 23, 2023, a day when India's Chandrayaan-3 spacecraft made history by becoming the first to touch down on the lunar South Pole, a place we can't normally see from Earth. What makes this lunar hideaway so fascinating to scientists? Well, it turns out it's hiding something precious: lunar ice. This place is believed to be more abundant with this ice than what we found up north. And it's not hard to see why scientists are so buzzed up about it. It's a frozen water source, and it could become our key to building a permanent lunar home, or even fueling missions all the way to Mars. Scientists knew about this ice for over 2 decades, since the NASA spacecraft accidentally stumbled upon it during one of the missions. Then in 2018, NASA triumphantly declared that they're 100% sure about it. They said that the south pole of the moon is abundant with water. Now, picture this. Future lunar settlers could tap into this water supply. It could help us sustain life in the barren lunar landscape. Plus, by cleverly splitting the water into oxygen and hydrogen, we could receive both air and rocket fuel. All this will make moon missions more feasible and self-sustaining. It's also a great glimpse into the past. This ice, maybe as old as the moon itself, could unlock the moon's and Earth's deep mysteries. But it turns out that water isn't rare in space at all. There might be lots of planets out there where life could thrive. We know this because we started finding water vapor around stars, and this water is remarkably similar to the water in our own solar system. This discovery suggests that the water on Earth originally came from space. Water forms around stars in the cloud of extremely hot vapor. Then it turns into ice and sticks to tiny dust particles. These particles stick together over time and become bigger objects, like comets, planets, and other things. Some of these become comets and planets in our own solar system. And this is how water is being spread across the universe, and it may be how it got to our planet and the moon too. Scientists think that the lunar ice might have journeyed here eons ago. Maybe it hitched a ride on water-rich asteroids that smacked into the moon's surface. All this has big implications for us. The southern pole is an ideal canvas for humanity to establish a real moon base. Imagine brick domes connected by secret underground tunnels. They'll be bustling with people busily operating computers. Some others will be cruising the lunar landscape in their jeeps or on their way to mine precious resources. We have some pretty cool ideas on how to build this. First, you probably imagine hauling hefty and water-draining shelters all the way from Earth. But maybe there's a more effective way. Think about our history as a civilization. Every time we ventured to a new place, we surveyed the surroundings for available resources and used them to survive and thrive. This is how we spread across our own planet. So why shouldn't we spread across the moon the same way? Now, you might wonder what resources the moon might offer. We know about the ice, and it can be turned into water, but we can clearly see that our planet lacks lush greenery and edible food. Well, it might not be obvious, but the moon does have something to offer: mineral resources and sunlight. Unlike Earth, where the sun rises and sets, the lunar poles offer quite a beautiful sight. The sun gracefully orbits the horizon the entire day, which means it can provide an almost uninterrupted source of power. Imagine living in a world bathed in perpetual sunlight. I'm sure the solar panels will love it. Me? Not so much. Still, we could use not only the sun's light, but also its heat. Honestly, we should just use everything. If we're left with spare metal while producing oxygen, find a purpose for that metal too. We need to treat the environment responsibly, not only on Earth, but on the moon as well. Which is why scientists are learning how to turn the moon's most abundant resources, regolith, into sturdy bricks. They've been quite inventive in figuring out how to create moon bricks. Scientists want to use the sun's heat to melt lunar dust, layer by layer, essentially creating a 3D printer for moon dust. Engineers have also cooked up bricks using solar ovens and zapped lunar soil with microwaves. They become quite adept at it. So yeah, perhaps we're going to establish a little brick factory on the moon and build regolith houses. It's like Minecraft in real life. As soon as you find some cool new material, you gotta build a tiny house with it. If successful, these bricks could be used to construct entire buildings, potentially covering inflatable modules or giving new life to abandoned landers. So, will astronauts need to become skilled bricklayers? Well, they won't do everything themselves. We'd have to create a small automated system involving robots working collaboratively. Humans will, of course, oversee the construction site. Despite all this automation, scientists believe that living on the moon is going to be, well, call it cozy. The designs may involve stacked living quarters or multi-purpose areas. However, there would be some challenges too. On the moon, things get extreme. Imagine scorching temperatures that can go up to 212 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, and at night, they plunge down to a chilly minus 290 degrees. And it's not just the weather. The moon gets relentlessly exposed to solar radiation, cosmic rays, and micrometeorite impacts. All these things gradually wear down anything on its surface. Another big challenge is the lunar dust. On the moon, there's no air to breathe, and the dust there can cause problems. And this one isn't only regular dust. It's super clingy and can even make astronauts sneeze and have watery eyes, as if they're having a lunar hay fever. It can also damage equipment and spacesuits. It's not something you want to mess with. Scientists have found that the dust is made when meteors hit the moon, creating tiny particles and sharp glass shards. It's toxic, and its tiny particles can float around in low lunar gravity, making it hard to breathe. Unlike on Earth, the moon doesn't have wind or rain to clean it away. So now they're studying it to find out how to prevent this annoying problem from ruining their entire mission. There's more to this lunar haven than meets the eye. Scientists also want to delve into the mysteries of low-frequency electromagnetic waves there. These waves are whispers from the far reaches of the universe. These elusive signals have remained hidden from us for ages. We only caught some cacophony of radio and other background noise, but that's it. On the moon's dark side, however, we can finally record and study them. Studying these waves will help scientists to unlock the secrets of the universe's origins. It's not just about the Earth or the moon. We're talking about peering back to the very beginnings of our world. Our new lunar lab might help us to forever reshape our understanding of the cosmos. So, NASA has some big plans on the moon now. Their Artemis mission completed a successful return to Earth in December 2022 after nearly a month in space. It ventured far beyond the Moon. This mission proved the capabilities of some of our recent technological developments that will help us explore Mars. The goal of Artemis is to establish a lasting presence on the Moon. They want to create a gateway, like a space station in orbit around the satellite, to help with the landings. Artemis 2 is set to carry astronauts to lunar orbit in 2024, and during Artemis 3, which should take place in the mid-2020s, 2 astronauts will touch down near the Moon's south pole. It's quite possible that the lunar base will be built within the next couple of decades. So, stay tuned.